here we are. We're a year later in a team that had to replace a lot of really key pieces off last year's team, and it feels like this is the one that's going to break through. Hello and welcome in. It's Always College Football. It is our Sunday PM edition of Always College Football. It's our 10 takeaways show. If you're new to us here at ACF, we do a rapid fire reaction on Sunday mornings. That's when we watch the games like everybody else, just on TV, and we enjoy them and we consume them and we learn a lot about these teams as best we can. I'm in the booth, so I don't get to watch them all the time exactly when I want, how I want. I wish I could sit at home with 5 monitors and watch them all. Fortunately, it's not the reality of what I have to do for work on Saturdays, but Sundays is for the podcast. So we usually give our rapid fire reactions based on what we saw, and then we watch the tape and we dive in a little bit deeper and we draw some conclusions about what we witnessed in the outcomes last Saturday. So very much looking forward to this show. As always, a lot of big hitters in the SEC in particular. We do hit a little bit of the Big 12, ACC, and Big 10. Plenty of things to break down. We'll even go into the G5 today, which has gotten really interesting these last couple weeks. So we're looking forward to that. And we'll, of course, put a bow on it with a little Heisman Trophy conversation, because that, I think, has been thrown into a bit of a flux with what we saw this past weekend. A couple of notable performances that I think have elevated the candidacy of a couple people that are playing really good football. So before we get into the takeaways, do want to do a little housekeeping. If you could, just go on there and check out our podcast, whatever podcast platform you use. You can subscribe to the podcast. That way our episodes will automatically be loaded in there. And if you're here with us via the ESPN College Football YouTube channel, thanks for being here. Hit that thumbs up button. We're good to go there as well. And if you're on either, go ahead and leave us a rating, leave us a review if you could, if you feel like it, if you want to. We've had a lot of really nice comments being sent to us the last couple of weeks, and we're grateful to you guys for how much you guys have enjoyed the show, because ultimately y'all are why we do it. So let's kick things off with takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 1, Texas A&M has arrived. And I don't say this lightly either. I don't really like to anoint teams after 8 games. I think it's dangerous. I think it's reckless. And knowing what we've seen from A&M in the past, they haven't always been as good in November as they are in September, October. So it is a little dangerous, but this team's different, aren't they? They feel different. If you watch them, they're just different. I don't know how else to describe them. This team just plays really well together, and they have some aspects that are just full take over the game, guys. This game was a tale of 2 halves. I mean, mistakes early in this game. I mean, a lot, frankly. I mean, they had their C- performance in the first half of this football game, and then in the second half, it was A++. It was an absolute thing of beauty. But the first half, I'm not going to lie, it was kind of ugly. I mean, you throw a bad interception in the end zone on a stick nod where the safety runs right underneath it. Just, by the way, I've thrown a pick on that exact same play. It was just in Arkansas's end zone. So I'm not criticizing, because I've done the exact same thing, Marcel. Don't worry. They had a punt blocked. They had an unsportsmanlike on a 3rd and 18 that gave LSU a 1st and 10. But in the second half, man, they flipped that thing on its head, didn't they? I mean, it started really in the second half with the kick return. And that is a play that no one else will talk about. No other show in the college football world will talk about that second half kickoff return to open things up that got them to the 44-yard line. I mean, that was a huge play in the game. Why? Because it creates an immediate momentum boost, an immediate surge into what you're doing on that side of the ball offensively. You go down, you get the touchdown, 56-yard touchdown drive. You force a quick drive by LSU. They punt it back to you. Punt return to the house. In the blink of an eye, the thing was over, right? And they scored 35 of their 49 points there in the second half. That's their 4th straight road game with 40-plus points dating back to last season. That's the longest streak in school history. And it's tied for the longest streak in SEC history. But if you look at their starting field position in the second half, that tells a huge story. And usually starting field position is kind of an indicator of where the team is overall. not so much offensively or defensively, but also special teams as well. It's an indicator of a well-rounded football team because everybody's doing their part when it comes to field position and starting field position and what you do with it when you actually get the ball. So in the second half, they started their first drive on the 44-yard line. They're 44, so near midfield. The second possession lasted about 14 seconds. That was a punt return to the house. The third possession, they started at the plus 50, meaning right at midfield. The fourth possession, they were at the plus 33-yard line. After a fourth down stop later in the game, they're at the plus 29-yard line. The field position in the second half was amazing, and that to me is an indicator of a very healthy performance in all three phases. This is probably one of my favorite offenses to watch. They just have so much explosive speed. Everyone on their offense that touches the football feels like they can break it open, maybe outside of the tight ends who aren't necessarily huge catch and run guys, but with Marcel Reed's dynamic nature at running the football when he needs to. Casey Concepcion's lightning in a bottle. Mario Craver, when every time he touches the football, looks like he's shot out of a cannon. Morrow at running back. Bussy, when he gets some action on. They just have so many guys that have such explosive speed and big play potential on every single snap. And Marcel Reed, he is super dynamic. And if you look at the first touchdown, look at the burst he showed. This is LSU now. They're playing against LSU. Say whatever you want about LSU's program, but LSU has always had tremendous athleticism defensively. Always. Well, right through it. I mean, right through it, outrunning defensive backs in the process. And I think quarterbacks are always going to be defined by how they play on third down. And there were some great plays by Marcel Reed on third down in this game. The throw to Bethel Roman, where Bethel Roman reached behind it, grabbed it with one. It was an amazing catch, but there was also a defender. That was a fairly tight window that Marcel Reed had to throw it into. Now, the interception in the end zone, not good, right? Not good. But at the end of the day, he made plays with his legs, with his arm, making accurate throws, making good decisions. He really played a really good football game. Honestly, if you could just remove that interception in the end zone, I think it was maybe his best performance of his career, or at least close to it for sure. And if you look at the numbers, you get 4 touchdowns, of course. Third Aggie player with 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, and 100 rushing yards in the last 30 years. Trevor Knight did it. Johnny Manziel did it. So pretty good company to be in when looking at what Marcel Reed did in this performance. Off the charts. It was also, when you look at it with Casey Concepcion, what he has added to the return game, what he adds from a catch and run standpoint. Amazing. I mean, just a complete game breaker. And I think, I said this in the offseason, that's one of the biggest portal moves of the entire offseason. And I don't know how long it was going to take for him to become a guy. Man, I think everybody now knows what Casey Concepcion is with the ball in his hands. And then defensively, Cassius Howell was at times untouchable around the edge. I mean, just going right around tackles. I mean, just tackles couldn't even touch him. Couldn't even breathe on him. He was right around him. And if you look at it, 7 sacks. On all 7 sacks recorded by the Aggies, they had 4 or fewer pass rushers. So not a single sack was generated by way of blitz. Purely done with a standard 4-man rush, albeit sometimes a simulated rush where they add a linebacker on and drop somebody out. But still a 4-man rush, and they got 7 sacks. You know how hard that is to do? Well, just so you know, it was the last time that we've seen the Aggies do that was in 2014, and that was against SMU. And you don't need to go back and look at 2014 SMU, but they weren't LSU. Okay, I'll just tell you, if you look at the LSU's first 7 games of the season, they allowed just 7 sacks against 4 or fewer pass rushers. So very rare occurrence. Their first win in Baton Rouge since 94. They're 8-0 for the first time since 92. They're 5-0 in conference play for the second straight season. This is the first time that the Aggies are 5-0 in conference play in consecutive seasons since doing it 3 straight years from 91 to 93. So very impressed, continue to be remarkably impressed with Texas A&M. To play that poorly early and to be that sloppy early and to flip the switch at halftime says a lot about their resolve. And for LSU on the other side, to allow nearly 50, that's the most they've allowed at home while ranked since 2008. Now they've dropped 3 of their last 4 after starting the season 4-0. I do think there's a glimmer of hope, though, with what we saw from Harlem Berry. I think he provides some much-needed juice at at running back, so we'll see where his role goes from this point forward. So that was nice to see. But Garrett Nussmeier is simply just leaving too many plays on the field. This guy's a fifth-year senior. He's too accurate. He's too good. I know he's banged up. I know he's less than 100%, but there are some big misses in this game. And you can't miss throws when you're playing against a defense that's this good. So LSU, back to the drawing board during the bye week. They got to get their quarterback healthy. They got to get him being more accurate. And they got to find a way to be a little better defensively because, my goodness, man, they allowed a lot of big plays in this game. Takeaway number 2. Alabama just weathered the, quote, sandstorm and found a way to win. To trail by 8 late and somehow find a way to escape in regulation with a 29-22 victory against an upset-minded South Carolina team was pretty remarkable. Just to put into perspective how difficult that comeback was. Alabama's the third FBS team this season to win by trailing by 8 or more in the final 3 minutes. Troy did it earlier this month against Texas State, and Georgia did it at Tennessee back in September. Now, entering today, teams that trailed by 8 or more points with 3 minutes to go in the game were 2 and 293 in 2025. It's the first time Alabama's overcome an 8-point deficit in the final 3 minutes in the last 20 seasons. Alabama is now 2-5 when trailing in the fourth quarter under Kalen DeBoer. Their other win actually came against South Carolina last season. Now, everything in this game for Alabama was just a little bit off. Just a little bit off. You could tell kind of early, everything was just the tiniest bit out of sorts. And that's what happens, by the way, when you're playing a hostile environment. You've run the gauntlet of having played 4 straight ranked teams. To have a slightly off day is to be expected. Guess what? That makes you human. That makes you normal. It was a slightly inaccurate throw here. It's a dropped pass here. It's a really poor block on the backside of a run that gets stopped in the backfield for -2 as opposed to being a 5 or 6 yard gain play side. It's a punt that hits a player and is recovered deep in your own territory. I mean, everything was just the tiniest bit off. Now, they were fortuitous to create a turnover off of a dropped pass that bounces right up into Day-Day Jones's hands and returns it to the house. So yeah, they had a couple breaks in this game for sure, but everything was just the tiniest bit uncomfortable from start to finish in this game. Let's start with Ty Simpson. First and foremost, there was a throw that he made in this game on a deep ball to Ryan Williams. It was incomplete, but it was down the right-hand side. That ball was in the air 65 yards. You know how long that is in a game? In a game to throw it 65 plus in the air was pretty filthy. So besides that, outside, I didn't know he had that kind of arm. That was big time. But he was just the tiniest bit off the mark early. Missed a couple throws that he normally makes, whether it's a 3rd and 4 out in the flat, just a little bit too wide. It's a 2nd and 10 where he throws it just a little bit too low. Guy makes the catch, but doesn't allow for much yards after catch. Even a couple that were caught, but they were just the tiniest bit off target. And normally, that's right on the money. They catch it, they run, and a big play can be created. But he also had some great moments in this game. The touchdown on 4th down to Cuevas was a big-time play. Didn't like it play side, scans all the way back and threads the needle between a couple defenders. The best throw of the day might have actually been a drop by Ryan Williams. It would have been a phenomenal catch, but it was 4th and 1. He's getting hit from behind somehow. I have no idea how that ball was on target, or at least as close to on target as it was. That would have been an unbelievable play. So I think he did a really good job in the final drive as well. Very accurate, very decisive, good job utilizing his legs, good job executing the screen game. There were also 3 or 4 drops in this game that could have changed things dramatically. So here's the biggest takeaway when it comes to this one from Alabama. You played about your B- game. Offensively, B- at best. I think there were yards left on the field. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. There were yards left on the field, but man, in crunch time, gotta have it situation to put a drive like that together to go down the field, tie the game, hit the 2-point conversion, and then your defense ripping the ball out, giving you an opportunity to win it in regulation and not leaving it up to the kicking game, scoring on the field with Jeremy Bernard around the right-hand side. Just a phenomenally gutsy performance from the Crimson Tide. And to go and win on the road against a great defense that has very disruptive personnel and a dynamic quarterback that can do a lot of things on the football field. To win a game like that in regulation, playing as average as you did, says a lot about the fight and determination of this team. They also, on defense, continue to be remarkably opportunistic. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from that side of the ball. I thought they actually played a really good defensive football game. Now, obviously, you give up a touchdown after a muffed punt. That's a tough situation. You give up one deep ball, it's a tough situation. But for the most part, you look at it throughout the course of the game, I thought Bama played pretty well on that side of the ball. So you got to feel like that side is growing in some areas, and they continue to be at their best when it's required on the biggest moments and the biggest downs of the football game. As far as South Carolina is concerned, I thought it was a better performance offensively, but still a lot of room to grow on that side of the ball. They were opportunistic. They hit a couple big plays, but they still just don't have enough consistency to put it all together. But a great defensive performance from South Carolina from start to finish, I felt like, in that matchup. Takeaway number 3, Ole Miss is going to the college football playoff. Now, it's funny because you don't really want to jump to conclusions. We're still in October, right? And I don't like saying, oh, they're going, it's a lock. I don't even know if it's necessarily a lock, but man, it feels likely, doesn't it? And what's funny is that last year was supposed to be the year. Last year was supposed to be the year where the roster was absolutely stocked on defense at all 3 levels. The veteran quarterback that became a first rounder in Jackson Dart was back in year 3 as the starting quarterback. The personnel at wide receiver, they really invested in the roster. Like last year was the year. That was the year they were going to go. The schedule was manageable. And then here we are. We're a year later in a team that had to replace a lot of really key pieces off last year's team, and it feels like this is the one that's going to break through. Now, you look at their quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss. The fact that one of the biggest stories in the entire season was that he has now replaced Austin Simmons as the starter. And he wasn't flawless in this game. He missed a couple throws. My goodness, against a defense like that to play that well on the road, pretty amazing. You look at the numbers, continue to be outrageously impressive. First Ole Miss player with 250 passing yards in each of his first 6 starts since Eli Manning in 2001. It's his 4th game with 300-plus passing yards and 50 rush yards this season. That's most in a season by an Ole Miss player in the last 30 years. And it ties Johnny Manziel in 2012 for the 2nd most in a season by an SEC player in the last 30 years, behind Jaden Daniels in 2023. So 2 Heisman Trophy winners are the only guys that have ever done what Trinidad Chambliss has done these last few games. I think you look at the wideouts, some really legit group across the board. And they did so with very little input from their biggest weapon in some cases, Daquan Wright, who's not at 100% right now. I think they're better along the offensive line than they were at the beginning of the season. That group is kind of rounding into form. They're really good at running back with Keywan Lacey. And then defensively, they still have things to iron out. They still give up a few too many big plays. They still have a couple liabilities in coverage. They're still pretty thin along the defensive line, but on Saturday, they made plays. The safety being created. They're with the defensive tackles essentially pushing that Oklahoma offensive line into their own end zone. The 4th down stop on 4th and 1 where they play it perfectly and they drag Mateer down before he can get the ball out to the running back in the flat. Forcing a fumble on special teams, probably the biggest play of the entire game, forcing the fumble. And if you look at ESPN analytics, right now, Ole Miss has a 37% chance to win out. That's the 3rd highest in the Power 4. The only 2 that are in front of them right now are Notre Dame and Ohio State. And if you look at those 2 teams, how good they've been first and foremost, and what their schedule looks like, it's understandable that they're ahead of Ole Miss. But it's pretty remarkable that Ole Miss sits at number 3. And the playoff predictor currently has them at 70%. I think that's way low. Way low. I would put it at like 85, 90% based on how things have gone up to this point. They play South Carolina at home this week. They'll be a double-digit favorite. They get Citadel the following week. They get Florida at home, be about an 8 to 10-point favorite there, and they're about a 7-point favorite on the road at Mississippi State. They are 29-2 as a double-digit favorite under Lane Kiffin. Both losses came last year. They were a 15.5-point favorite against Kentucky and lost on the field at home. And they were a 13.5-point favorite against Florida on the road in week 13. They lost that game as well. So this is a team that has not necessarily always played to their own potential. They have in the past, like last year. Maybe their level of play dipped down to the level of the competition. That doesn't feel likely this year. They just passed arguably their biggest test of the entire season on the road against a great defense in a hostile environment at 11 a.m. To get that win says an awful lot. So if they can be mature enough to go and get that one, I think they'll be mature enough to handle their business and finish at worst 3-1 down the stretch, which would have them at 10-2, which I think has them on the inside looking out at the college football playoff. As far as Oklahoma is concerned, it's about John Mateer. He got off to a really fast start, 11-14, 153 and a touchdown in the first half. And then in the second half, it felt like there were times when he was pressing. It felt like there were times when he was trying to do too much. There were plays left on the field by Oklahoma that have to be frustrating, like a 4th and 5 where a guy's wide open and he decides to pass it up in favor of the downfield throw. The final 2 drives from Oklahoma were very disappointing because they had momentum, they had an opportunity, they were moving the football, and then John Mateer tried to do too much. And he did that against Texas. He cannot do that going forward. Everything's still in front of Oklahoma. They can still very much get in the college football playoff conversation. Absolutely. They need Michigan to win. They need Ole Miss to win out. They need a few things to break their way. But they are absolutely not eliminated right now, knowing the quality of competition that they have coming up on their schedule at Tennessee, at Alabama. You get a game against LSU. You win all those, and you're sitting there at 10-2 with some of those wins. It'd be massive for Oklahoma down the stretch. They're not done yet, but they got to get their quarterback playing up to the level that he played at in the first 3 or 4 games of the year and not in the 3 games since the injury after he hurt his thumb against Auburn. Takeaway number 4, Vanderbilt is no longer a, quote, feel-good story. They are a legitimate title contender. Now, interpret that title however you wish, whether it's national, SEC, getting to the SEC championship game. In many ways, back in the day, it would have been a conference title. This team is a title contender. They are 7-1 for the first time since 1941. They just knock off Missouri 17-10. And Missouri had that Hail Mary at the end of regulation that was stopped at the 1-yard line, which was crazy, by the way. Vandy has 3 wins over AP-ranked opponents. That's their most in a single season since the beginning of the poll era in 1936. They win their first game as an AP top 10 team since 1947. That game in 47 was against Ole Miss. So this is a team that is very real. And they are, I think, a team that can beat you in a lot of different ways. In this game in particular, offense had some challenges. Offense struggled a little bit. Offense didn't have their best stuff. Offense got into a couple issues with penalties, which is not something that you often see. And they had 50 yards of first half penalties by itself, nullified some really big opportunities. One in particular that might have been a Heisman moment for Diego Pavia, where he's running around crazy, buying time, and all of a sudden finds his way into the end zone. Boop, flag on the play, wipes it out. That was one of the sickest plays I've seen, by the way, by a quarterback in a long time. This was a bit of a subpar performance from Diego Pavia. If you look at the offense as a whole, just 265 yards. This team won this game because of culture, and they won this game because of defense. This was a shutdown defensive type of performance. And the defining moment came there in the second half. Pavia throws the ball, gets tipped up in the air, intercepted. And it feels like everything at this point, all the momentum is shifting over to the side of the Missouri Tigers. Well, fast forward a few plays, you get a goal line stand, turnover on downs. And in the process, you unfortunately knock the quarterback, Bo Pribula, out when he gets stuffed on the quarterback run there along the right-hand side. Well, the next opportunity, missed field goal, and then 80 yards to the house. And with Vandy, they're not usually a quick strike team. That's not really who they are. It's more of a team that wants to methodically grind you out. But to see MK Young break to the outside and showcase some speed says an awful lot. You look at the game-winning drive, too. You hit the safety CJ Hurd that somehow ends up with the football on a massive turnover created. little bit of a botched exchange between the Missouri quarterback and running back, sitting on the guy's hip. CJ Hurd grabs it. Enormous play. And CJ Hurd's always making plays like that, by the way. I mean, he is always seemingly in the right place at the right time. You're going to feel his presence all throughout the game. So that bobbled exchange turns to a short field, and then boom, Diego Pavia caps it off with a rushing score with just under 2 minutes to play. Look, if you look at where things were, this was a gritty game. This was an ugly game. This was not a game that was for the faint of heart. This was a grind to watch, to study, and to honestly come out of it victorious says an awful lot. And now, if you look at it with Vanderbilt in the past, for Vanderbilt to win games against top-tier competition, they had to be A++, and the team that they were playing against had to have an off day. That's no longer the case. Vanderbilt was just the team that had the off day and still had a chance to win against a really quality Missouri opponent. They've now beaten 2 consecutive ranked opponents, and they have totally broken open what has been an SEC race long dominated by the blue bloods of the sport. Now they are staring straight ahead at an opportunity to finish the season at 10-2. And if they finish the season at 10-2, which is absolutely a reasonable expectation given how things are going to go here in the coming weeks, they're probably going to make the college football playoff. So this road trip now this week to Texas, a team that played really good in the fourth quarter of that football game, this now becomes one of the games of the weekend. And I do think that the way Vanderbilt's created, with all the different pathways that they have to victory, they will be a very difficult out for every single team they play. But it starts this week against the Longhorns, who are bouncing back in a really big way. So Vandy, very much the real deal. Takeaway number 5, the gap between Indiana and Oregon is growing. Now, right now, we know who's at the top of the Big Ten, right? We know that Ohio State resides in the top tier. I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know, right? Like, we're all on the same page there. We know Ohio State's the real deal, correct? Like, we're all good. Don't feel like that requires a lot of explanation. But I looked at the Big Ten for a while there, and I thought to myself, you know what? There's 3 teams at the top. This is a 3-horse race right now for the Big Ten title. And when you look at it and we fast forward to season's end, it'll be those 3 teams from the Big Ten that are in the college football playoff. Well, now I'm beginning to feel like there isn't a 3-team grouping at the top. It's really a 2-team grouping at the top, with Oregon, I think, taking a slight step back. Just a slight step back. While the performance against Rutgers last week was amazing, incredible, dynamic, dominant. This past weekend, it wasn't so pretty. Let's just start with Indiana, though. Man, they're so good. To get the party started, Aiden Fisher, right out of the gate, picks off the pass. Great eyes, great vision, exactly where he needs to be, grabs it, takes it to the house. They just do everything right. They do all the little things right. I love their quarterback. I think Fernando Mendoza is so good. He's so in control. He always looks so comfortable, doesn't he? Like, sometimes when you look at guys, they look all skittish. They look all, all tight, all anxious, whatever. With him, it's always so methodical. He has such a good feel and just a natural feel for the position, how he moves in the pocket, how he buys time. He even, by the way, showed some nifty moves on a quarterback scramble there on a big 3rd and 9 early in the game. I mean, spinning and creating and doing all these things. Just to put into perspective the level of dominance in this game, there were 162 snaps in this game. And that's not offense, defense. That is 162 plays in this game. So that includes all kickoffs. That includes all punts. That includes everything. 162. And then you can qualify those 162 plays by, quote, successful plays. So a successful play is determined in some cases by down and distance. And in some cases by EPA, earning, points, adjustments, and things like that. In this game, there were 68 successful plays. So that basically, just so you understand what that is, a successful first down, for example, is a gain of 5. That's a successful play. So in this game, on 162 plays, 68 were considered, quote, successful for both teams. So based on down and distance, yardage gained, what have you. Of those 68, Indiana had 46 of those 68 plays that were, quote, successful. That is 28% of the overall plays. 28% of the overall plays were, quote, successful. You know how absurdly high that is? Like in a given week, you might have 10, 12, 15%. They were at 28%. 46 out of 68 is a ridiculous level of ownership and dominance of the success rate in this game. UCLA, so if Indiana had 46, that means UCLA had 22. Of those 22 plays, 4 were punts. So it was a successful punt. They flipped the field, whatever. So 4 of those 22 plays were punts. 5 of those 22 plays were with 4 minutes or less to go in the game. So essentially, remove the 5 plays at the end that don't matter, remove the 4 plays from the punt unit, which is not that significant. Indiana had 46 successful plays to UCLA's 13. Think about that level of dominance. Unbelievable, guys. Absolutely unbelievable. That is one of the widest gaps I've seen this season. Oregon, on the other side, game started nicely, right? Little surprise onside kick right there. And I hate that Dante Moore got hit in the nose. Everything sounds like it's okay. Doesn't seem like it's an issue. You listen to Dan Lanning. He almost said it was nothing, no big deal. If he really had to play, we could have put him back in. But I think they'll be fine. They now have a bye week, though. And I think that will benefit getting Dante Moore back and playing the way he did early in the season, where everything was like clockwork. Because there have been some times this year where the pass rush has made him a little uneasy. You could see it from time to time. There's been a couple times this year in which his eyes haven't always been where they need to be when going through the progressions that he's being asked to go through. I love Oregon. I do. I think they're a very good football team. But right now, I think it's Ohio State and Indiana, neck and neck in the Big Ten. Then there's a gap. Then there's Oregon. Then there's a gap. And there's 2 or 3 other teams that I think can be very dangerous in this league moving forward. But right now, the gap after this weekend's performance between Oregon and Indiana, it went from being minimal to now noticeable. Not massive, but just enough for me to think now this is really a 2-horse race in the Big Ten more so than it was a 3. Takeaway number 6. The Texas Longhorns are not dead just yet. Not yet. Now, it was not looking pretty there for a little bit. They're sitting there down 31-14 and things were not good. But to overcome a 17-point deficit in the fourth quarter, just to put into perspective how rare that is. They haven't done it in nearly 20 years. The last time Texas did this was in 2007 against Oklahoma State. They were down 21 in the fourth that game. They came back to win at 38-35. This is the first time an SEC team has overcome a 17-point deficit entering the fourth quarter of a conference game since South Carolina Mizzou back in 2013. Now, entering Saturday, teams across the board down 17 in the fourth quarter were just 2 and 230 this season. Troy won at Buffalo on September 20th, and Washington went on the road to Maryland and beat them, having an unbelievable fourth quarter performance. They beat them on October 4th. So just 2 out of 232 opportunities for that to go down. Texas just did it. Pretty amazing. Their win probability in the fourth quarter was as low as 1.4%. And it feels like we've kind of written Texas off, haven't we? Like they've been quietly navigating through kind of a unique and difficult stretch. This team hasn't played in Austin since September. And it's been easy to kind of ignore what they've done over the last few weeks. Look, we obviously paid a lot of attention to the win against Oklahoma. That was an enormous win. But I think people kind of maybe fell out of favor with them after they didn't play very well against Florida. They didn't play very well in a victorious effort against the Kentucky Wildcats last week. And then things didn't look very good against Mississippi State. But they're still very much alive if you look at how things go down the stretch and some of the opportunities they have to play at home. They still have a game against Texas A&M at home. They have a game against Vanderbilt at home. And I think if you look at their quarterback, Arch Manning, and I know he didn't get to finish the game, he got banged up, got a concussion there on the quarterback run late in the game. That was probably the best quarter that he has played at the college level there in the fourth quarter of that football game. He had a career high 346 passing yards. He went 12 of 20 for 166 and 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter alone. He's the first Texas quarterback with 150 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter since 2019. That was Sam Ehlinger against Kansas. And the crazy thing is, it probably could have been a little better. There were some big drops on some pretty well-thrown balls in this game. The deep ball he threw to Wingo on the move to his left was a beautiful throw. The throw to Livingston there as he rolled to his right on a touchdown, that was a really tight window, and he threaded the needle. Now, they have a lot to clean up. Don't get me wrong. Texas is far from a finished product at this point. They have a lot to clean up along the offensive line. I think they have a few things to clean up with what we saw from them defensively. I think the defense will be just fine, just kind of an uncharacteristically difficult outing. And they'll be a favorite at home this week against Vandy. They'll be a very slight dog right now, 3 points or less on the road at Georgia. They'll be a double-digit favorite at home against Arkansas. And as of this moment, they will be a very slight 3 points or less underdog at home against Texas A&M. So if they win the 2 coin toss games against Georgia and A&M, they find a way to beat Vandy this weekend at home, and they beat Arkansas, this team could very easily find their way to 10-2. And 10-2 with 1 loss to Florida and 1 loss in the first game of the season against the number 1 team in the country, I think Texas is going to have a pretty strong argument to make. Now, got to win close games, and it won't be easy. But based on what we saw there in the fourth quarter of that football game, if that's what we get going forward from Texas, they're not going to be a team a lot of teams want to face down the stretch. Takeaway number 7. The final month of the season is going to be wild in the ACC. Wild. It might be the most fascinating league right now in the sport when it comes to determining who the heck is going to be there at the end and how many teams are going to be there at the end. And will they get 2 in? All the different conversations centering around the ACC right now. Currently, there are 7 teams in the ACC with 1 or fewer losses in conference. They have just 2 teams that are currently undefeated. Virginia is undefeated in the conference, and so is Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's undefeated overall. It was 3 last week, but SMU lost on the road to Wake Forest. SMU, however, hosts Miami this week, who's also one of those 1-loss teams. So it's about to be really interesting. I'll tell you why here in just a minute. But right now, the ACC is running through Atlanta, Georgia, and Georgia Tech. I think I watched this game, and I watched Haynes King. There were some moments, and there was one play that really summed up what Haynes King has become as a starting quarterback in college football. And look, we can show you a million beautiful plays. We can show you a lot of great throws. We can show you great running plays, things like that. But his level of competitiveness really stood out on one play that no one will talk about. Not one other show will mention this play. I guarantee you this. But if you want to, go and take a peek. Second quarter, there's just under 14 minutes to play. There's a really high snap, bad snap. All right, play's over. Broken play, it's done. Like this, for most quarterbacks, is a loss of 10. All right, loss of 10. The game, by the way, at this point is very much in the balance. It's 3-3. So this is a tight game at this point. He somehow corrals the bad snap. I don't even know how. Like, just knocks it down, catches it. And there's an unblocked defender that's coming right after him. And it's looking like, all right, this is not only going to be a big loss, but this might be a fumble. I mean, there's no telling what's going to happen right here. He corrals it, somehow goes backwards, goes around that defender, and turns what would have been a 10-yard loss into a 7-yard gain. So as opposed to playing 2nd and 19, it all of a sudden becomes a 2nd and 3. And he does this so many times throughout the game. And I mean, I'm just watching him. It's like he does such a great job of avoiding negative plays. He does such a great job of keeping Georgia Tech on schedule. And his fierce competitiveness is on display every single time he takes the field. It is so fun to watch this team, and they do such a great job on both sides of the ball. And while I don't think we can draw massive conclusions about a win against Syracuse, like Syracuse, since their quarterback got hurt, they're not very good. Let's just acknowledge what it is. But we're now looking at a Georgia Tech team that is 8-0 for the first time since 1966. They are unbeaten through 8 games for the first time since 1990. Pretty remarkable. That year they started 7-0-1, and that was the year that they actually split the national championship with Colorado. And Haynes King, I just referenced that one play. He's the first Georgia Tech player since at least 1995 with 3 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns in a single game. So, unbelievable performance from Georgia Tech. They're not the only one, though. You got Virginia. Had a very tricky game against North Carolina. Needed a 2-point conversion stop that was just inches short of being able to cross the pylon to the right-hand side. If you watch this will be a defensive blueprint that will be applied to Virginia going forward. So Virginia's going to have to adjust and maneuver just a little bit moving forward. Their defense, though, played very well in this game. And I do feel like in watching Virginia at times this year, defense has been a little bit overshadowed with some of the things they've done offensively. But they proved to me in this game, the offense, B-, C+ performance. Defense doing just enough to make sure that this game didn't get sideways by allowing just 10 points in regulation and ultimately getting the key stop there to win the game. So Virginia, a lot to clean up, a lot to learn from this performance, but still plenty of room to grow from where this team goes moving forward. And then Miami as well. Look, Miami, it was not pretty early in that game. They're in a 7-point hole to Stanford there early in this football game, and it wasn't looking very good. And then, boom, it's almost as if Miami's like, all right, enough messing around. Second half, let's go. And all of a sudden, we started to see the level of dominance, the level of execution that we saw in the first month of the season that led to Miami becoming the number 2 team in the country. So I feel like the switch now for Miami might have flipped. They might now be heading in the direction that we thought they'd be heading in as they continue throughout this gauntlet. I like right now the league in the ACC. If I were to fast forward right now, I think it'll be Georgia Tech, Miami. I think those are the 2 best teams. Will Miami ultimately get there? I don't know. We'll find out. But I do think Miami's best football might be in front of them based on what I saw there in the second half of that football game. I know it's Stanford. I know it's not a lot to learn. I get it. But at the same time, there were a lot of teams that didn't look as good as Miami did there in the second half. So I still trust them. I still think they're going to be pretty good. I still think it'll be a tough out. But guess what? Tough game this week on the road at SMU, who might have been looking ahead just a little bit to next week's performance, which is what led to the flat performance against Wake Forest and what was kind of a shocking upset this past weekend. Takeaway number 8. The Big 12 race remains wide open, but we have now welcomed in a new contender. Look, we know BYU and Cincinnati are both 5-0. We know Cincinnati travels to Utah this week, and that might be one of the toughest games left on the schedule for them, knowing it's away from home and how tough it is to go into Salt Lake and get a win. Texas Tech will host BYU in a couple weeks, but you know the team we haven't been talking a lot about here in the last few weeks, ever since they got beat badly by Texas Tech? That'd be the Houston Cougars. But the Houston Cougars are now 7-1 for the first time since 2021. To go on the road and to get a win against Arizona State was significant. Their first road win against an AP-ranked team since 2017. That was when Houston went to South Florida. So nearly a decade since they went on the road and won a game like this. And Connor Wigman continues to put together a very solid season. He joined De'Aaron King and Greg Ward as the only Houston players over the last 30 years with 200-plus passing yards and 100-plus rushing yards and multiple rushing touchdowns in a single game. And if you look at where Houston's at, there's a real chance they might be favored in every game the rest of the way. They got West Virginia at home this week. They go to UCF. Not an easy win by any chance. Like those are, I think West Virginia, they should handle them, but a road trip to UCF will be very difficult. Then they'll get a much needed bye before TCU comes to them. That'll be a very difficult game. And they finish by going on the road at Baylor. But given the way Houston's playing defensively, I think they can corral the Baylor Bears. I think they can corral the TCU Horned Frogs. So we'll see where things go, but they might be a favorite every game the rest of the way, which means if they win out and chalk flies, Houston might be sitting there at 11-1 at season's end. What about BYU? They desperately get that much needed bye week this week. This team just continues to find remarkable ways to get the job done. Like, they force turnovers. They're super physical up front on both lines of scrimmage. They have a great system. They have outstanding personnel at running back. They got a quarterback that is getting better almost every week with some of the things he's being asked to do. I'm loving where BYU is heading. Absolutely loving where they're heading. And they desperately needed this bye week to all right, we've had to survive some nail biters the last couple of weeks. We've had to play some competitive and emotional games the last couple of weeks. We've had to dig out of holes at times the last couple of weeks against Arizona to erase a 10-point deficit there in the fourth quarter, to erase a 14-point deficit on the road at a desperate Iowa State team this past week. This is a much-needed break to kind of, all right, calm down. Let's get things back on track, and let's put together a 4-quarter performance. I want to see 4 quarters from BYU, because if we can get 4 quarters from BYU, there's no telling what this team might be capable of. But it does feel like at times slow starts, and then boom, they figure it out. They flip the switch, and then things get going in the right direction for them. But I love what I've seen so far from this team. I refuse to doubt them anymore. I thought this was a big test this past weekend, man. This is a big test to go on the road against a well-coached, proud Iowa State football team whose back was against the wall. Not only did you survive a really nice first half surge from Iowa State, you flip momentum, get a score before the half, and then boom, completely take the game over from that point forward. Very impressive stuff from BYU. Bye week this week, they'll go to Texas Tech before TCU comes to them. They also go to Cincinnati before finishing up with UCF at home. As far as Texas Tech is concerned, dominant performance this past weekend. Not a huge surprise. No need to spend a ton of time on Texas Tech's total domination of Oklahoma State. It was not a huge shock. At Kansas State, though, might be dicey this week. Just saying, Kansas State just took care of business against Kansas in convincing fashion. Maybe Kansas State is starting to find their footing. And remember, in the preseason, this was one of the Big 12 favorites. So maybe it just took them a little while to figure out who they are, to figure out how to attack people. That'll be a tricky game for Texas Tech before BYU comes to them next week. Then they get UCF, who they should handle at home, before a bye week and a road trip in the finale at West Virginia. Texas Tech should be favored in every game from this point forward, but they got to get their quarterback back at some point. They got to get him back. I think Will Hamden's a fine backup. Baron Morton is the straw that stirs the drink. They need him healthy down the stretch if they're going to run the table. And then finally, Cincinnati remains undefeated right now in the Big 12 with a massive road trip to Utah this weekend, the site of College Game Day. So one of the biggest games of the weekend, and that game will be kicking at 10:15 Eastern time. And you know what it's like sometimes to be an East Coast team having to travel to altitude and play at night. Very tricky spot this week. So they got to go on the road to Utah before they get a bye. Arizona comes to them, and then BYU comes to them in the second to last game of the regular season before they go to TCU. So Big 12 is about as wide open as it gets right now. I don't think there is a league right now where you have that much quality at the very top. They can go 4 deep, and I could see all 4 of those teams potentially punching their ticket to the college football playoff. Takeaway number 9. The Group of 5 playoff spot just got sent into a tailspin, did it not? To think that they're with a solid lead, 31 to 17, in cruise control. South Florida is about to take care of business. Memphis is going to have their second loss in conference, so we can remove Memphis from the conversation. And then, boom, 17 points in the fourth quarter. Memphis's first fourth quarter comeback of 14-plus points since 2020. All right. And for South Florida, the first time they've blown a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter since 2011. Now remember, and I think a lot of people sometimes forget this because we spend so much time talking about the G5 playoff spot and who's going to get it and what it should be. You got to win your conference. That is number one. You have to win your conference. And the 2 teams right now that have the best shot aren't even in the driver's seat in the AAC. Quietly, the Navy midshipmen are 7-0 for the first time since 1978. They just beat FAU by 10. Blake Horvath had 4 rushing touchdowns in the game. That's the second time in his career in which he's done that. They are 5-0 in the AAC right now, but a very tricky game coming up this week where they have to travel to Denton, Texas to take on the 7-1 North Texas Mean Green. If Navy can somehow go and get a win there, that's one of the toughest hurdles they have remaining on their schedule. And remember, they're undefeated. And the two teams that everybody's talking about right now in the AAC and the G5 playoff conversation are Memphis and they are South Florida. Well, Navy's technically in the driver's seat. Tulane is also 3-0 in the AAC. But they do have to travel to Memphis on November 7th. That's a Friday. And as far as an analytics standpoint, USF is still the favorite. They have about a 28% chance of making the college football playoff, even with the loss yesterday and their current 3-1 conference record. The loss to Memphis loses them the tiebreaker to Memphis, but they also have the tiebreaker over North Texas, and they have to go to Navy, which means they could get a win up there on November 15th. So USF still very much in the mix, even though they had the disappointment of yesterday's outcome. Now, Memphis hosts Tulane and Navy. So they're really probably in the driver's seat as much as any other. They have an 18% chance to make the college football playoff, according to the college football playoff predictor. North Texas, even after the loss a couple weeks ago to USF, they're sitting at 18%. And then Tulane has a 16% chance to make the playoffs. So to have four teams all in the same league, all sitting between 28 and 16% to make the playoff is absolutely off the charts. This is wide open. And remember, if you don't make the conference championship game, you don't make the playoff. You have to not just make it, but you have to win it. So South Florida not in control of their own destiny, technically. Memphis not technically in control of their own destiny, but kind of, because they host Tulane and Navy. But there's also one other team that is lingering right now with an 11% chance. That's Boise. Out of the Mountain West, Boise has lost the head-to-head to USF, but they keep chugging along. Just 2 losses on the season, one of those losses coming to Notre Dame. So wide open in the G5 playoff spot right now. Takeaway number 10, let's do another Heisman update. It's that time of year. We don't love doing Heisman in October, but since it's a fascinating race, I figured we'd dive in. I still think right now Fernando Mendoza might be in the driver's seat according to the odds market. He is the leader. He's got plus 250 right now. He goes and engineers a blowout victory at the hands of UCLA. Didn't have a gaudy stat line by any stretch, but he's currently leading the country with 24 touchdown passes. And when you watch him, he's been outstanding. He might have delivered the best win of the college football season when he went on the road to Autzen Stadium and knocked off the previously undefeated Oregon Ducks. Ty Simpson, his odds slipped just a little bit based on this past week. He was at plus 350 prior to this past weekend's win at South Carolina. He now sits at 4-1. But if you look at what's coming up for Ty Simpson, an opportunity to play on a massive stage against LSU, an opportunity to play on a massive stage against Oklahoma, an opportunity to play in the Iron Bowl, which is always widely consumed, and then possibly the SEC championship game as well. Tons of opportunities for Ty Simpson moving forward. And I was kind of surprised, frankly, when you watched the game yesterday. I didn't think he was at his best, but to see his odds slip on the game like that, I was surprised. I thought he played pretty well under the circumstances against a really good defense, but he threw for 253 and 2 touchdowns. The biggest thing was the game-tying drive. The way he executed that drive, 7.5 minutes, 14 plays right down the field, gets the 2-point conversion with just over 2 minutes to play. And then, of course, leading the game-winning drive in the final moments of regulation as well. Ty Simpson still sits in a very good spot to potentially bring home the award. Julian Sayin, his candidacy has taken a massive turn in a positive direction in the last few weeks. He's sitting there at 4-1. He's tied with Ty Simpson. He also has a great opportunity against Michigan in the season finale. You know, that'll be watched by 15 million people probably. So he is a top contender. And you look at the efficiency, you look at the completion percentage, how he's playing across the board. Julian Sand very much in the mix. And I think arrow probably pointing up. Nobody positively impacted their Heisman Trophy odds more so than Marcel Reed this past weekend. I thought it was his best game. Even though it was not flawless, I thought it was his best game of the season. He was dynamic. He showcased mobility. He absolutely crushed LSU from time to time with run game. He had over 100 yards rushing, went for over 200 through the air, a couple touchdowns as well. I really liked what I saw from Marcel Reed. That was a great performance. And I think he right now, if the ballots were being submitted today, which they're not, he would be in a great position based on last week's performance to potentially bring it home. And you think about what's coming up for him. He still has a big game on Black Friday on national television on ABC against the Texas Longhorns. He still has a possibility of a championship game in the SEC to put forth a great effort there as well. Marcel Reed's going to have huge stages from this point forward. And if he can replicate that performance that he put forth in the second half, Marcel Reed is in a really good spot to potentially enter the conversation as well. And then finally, Diego Pavia. And I think if this were to go to just a flat out football player, he'd be a hard guy not to take a good, long, hard look at. Now, you look at the numbers. The numbers are never going to really blow you away with Pavia. He's not going to blow you away or throw for 400. He's not necessarily going to run for 250. This is a guy that makes plays. And if it became a highlight reel award, which at times in some years it is, he might have the highlight reel that can go with just about anybody. I mean, the things that he does running around, buying time, creating, extending plays, turning nothing into something. He, I think, is a guy that needs an awful lot of consideration. And guess what? Big opportunities coming up for him as well. And it doesn't hurt that his team is doing things on the football field that Vanderbilt has not done since World War II. He has got them in the driver's seat right now to potentially get to the college football playoff. And if he does that, it wouldn't surprise anybody if Diego Pavia ultimately brings home the Heisman Trophy. Now into our bold predictions. We always appreciate you guys submitting these on our social media platform at AlwaysCFB. You can also do so on the ESPN College Football YouTube page, where you can go and submit some of your bold predictions for the upcoming week's games. Washington takes out Illinois by 2 scores. That's from Yeller Cat 500, Cat 7. Well done. I thought it was going to go exactly the way you thought it was going to go. Washington handles business. They win the game over Illinois 42-25. Next, we'll go to Rainbow Trout Y3T. Cincinnati Bearcats win by over 20 and move into the top 15. Well, they win by 21. Top 15, absolutely possible. I think in many ways likely with how things have gone for them up to this point. And then from Benjamin Crenshaw, 50-35. Vandy continues to be a Cinderella. Yes, they are. They knock off Missouri 17-10. Now, some that weren't so good. From Snotty Edits, Indiana loses on a Hail Mary attempt that is batted down and they fall out of the top 10. Didn't happen. Got to respect how bold that was. That would have been a 100 out of 100 on the boldness scale. So well done, Snooty Edits, but didn't go that way. They won by 50. Let's go next to Rose 10K. Texas A&M loses to LSU. They always choke against LSU. Not this time. A&M flips the script there at halftime, plays a flawless second half en route to a 49-25 victory. And then from Gator _boy, Mississippi State gets their first SEC win in 2 seasons. So close. So close. That's now 2 overtime SEC losses in Starkville for the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Texas somehow erases a 17-point fourth quarter deficit to win the game in overtime, 45-38. We appreciate all of you guys being with us. Continue to submit your bold predictions. Continue to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get the podcast, and continue to check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So for all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.